Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a really big historical puzzle. Okay, so think about this. For over 600 years, the Ottoman Empire was a global powerhouse. It spanned 3 continents. But as the Industrial Revolution was setting the world on fire, the empire, well, it just kind of sat that one out. It's one of history's great economic mysteries. So what happened? Why?
So how do we even begin to unpack this puzzle? Well, the answer might not be what you think. It's not really about technology or natural resources. It's about something more fundamental, the rules of the game that shaped the entire empire. And to understand those rules, we gotta dig into its core economic institutions.
And when we look at those institutions, economists ask this really sharp question. Were the empire systems built to create widespread prosperity, or were they actually designed to pull wealth and resources towards a very small group at the top? So what in the world are economic institutions? Well, you can think of them like this. They're the rules of the game in any society. They're the formal laws, sure, but also the unwritten customs that guide how an economy works. They set the incentives for absolutely everyone, from a farmer all the way up to the sultan. And this brings us to a really key idea. On one side, you've got inclusive institutions. Think of these as creating a level playing field, protecting private property, and giving people a real reason to invest and innovate. But on the flip side, you have extractive institutions. These are designed to concentrate power and funnel wealth straight to a small elite. So the big question is, which path did the Ottomans go down? To figure this out, we're going to look at 2 super important areas: how the empire handled land and how it organized all its trade.
Okay, first step, land and property. Now, in most of the places that industrialized, secure private property rights were like the bedrock of the whole system. They let people build and keep their own wealth. But the Ottoman system, it worked in a totally different way.
So here's the deal with the Ottoman system. It was this perfect triangle. The state controlled the land, which paid for the military, and the military then protected the state. It's a brilliant loop if your goal is political stability. But think about it from your perspective. If the Sultan could at any point claim your land, would you really pour your life savings into making it better for the long haul? Nah, probably not, right? The system was great for control, but it actively discouraged the kind of private wealth building that really fuels an industrial takeoff.
All right, so that's the land. Now let's head into the cities and look at how things were made and sold. And here, we run into another one of these huge defining institutions, the guild system.
So in the cities, almost all trade was run by these things called guilds, or ahilic. Now their goal was actually pretty noble: make sure prices were fair, goods were high quality, and society was stable. They controlled everything, from the price of bread to who got to be a shoemaker. But here's the catch. By guaranteeing that stability, they basically snuffed out competition. And if there's no competition, there's very little reason to get creative, be more efficient, or invent something new.
And that's the core of the trade-off right there. As the historian Relly Schechter says, the system chose stability over everything else. It created a kind of closed shop, which was great for the people already inside, but it walled them off from the chaotic, disruptive, and powerful forces of innovation that were completely transforming Europe at the time.
Now, hold on. It would be totally wrong to think the Ottomans just sat there and did nothing while the world changed. Not at all. By the 1800s, the leaders knew they were falling behind. They were really aware of it, and they launched this whole series of super ambitious reforms to try and catch up. Just look at the pace of this. Starting with the Tanzimat reforms, the empire starts borrowing heavily from Western playbooks. They bring in modern laws for things like trademarks and patents, the legal nuts and bolts of innovation. They open the doors to foreign banks and new kinds of companies. On paper, this looked like a complete overhaul, a revolution.
But, and this is a huge but, just writing new laws on a piece of paper wasn't nearly enough. The reforms are kind of like planting a brand new, modern tree in old, rock-hard soil.
So what went wrong? Why didn't it work? Well, for a few big reasons. First, these reforms were often just patchwork, not a single coherent plan. Plus, the local population often just didn't have the technical skills to go toe-to-toe with the European merchants who came flooding in. And sometimes, that foreign money actually ended up hurting local businesses more than it helped. The bottom line is, you just can't undo centuries of habit with a few quick legal fixes.
And all of this leads us to one final, really big idea that kind of ties this whole economic puzzle together. It's a concept called path dependency. And it's a simple but incredibly powerful idea. History matters. The choices you make in the past create a path. And once you're on that path, it is really, really hard to get off it. The path the Ottomans chose, the one that valued central control way more than individual hustle, that path was just carved too deep to suddenly make a sharp turn towards a modern industrial economy, even when its leaders knew they had to.
And you know what? That path didn't just disappear when the empire did. Nope. The legacy of these institutions, this economic DNA, it went on to shape its successor states, including modern Turkey, for decades to come. The rules of the game set down centuries ago cast a very, very long shadow.
So you see, the story of the Ottoman economy isn't just a history lesson. It's this incredible case study that makes us ask a much bigger question, one that's relevant today for every country on Earth. How much can any nation's economy ever truly escape its own history? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.